Hey, what's going on, everyone? Your boy Tim Penny here, along with Custody Cliff and our guest Chris from Phoenix Gaming, here to talk about Diablo 4, 10th edition, Warhammer, and just pretty much life in general. Um, Chris, who I'll give a brief introduction, and then I'll let him talk more about himself. He actually came to the team or became a friend of the show through our good friend Jeremy, also known as Curie from the main show. I guess they met while you guys were working and doing coaching slash deputy TOing at Kansas City. I guess you guys really hit it off, and he sent you our way. And we've kind of been talking behind channels, and we just like, hey man, we got a show coming up this week. Why don't you just come on, shoot the show with us? So Chris, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your channel, about KC, about whatever, man.
Yeah. Honestly, the interaction with Jeremy was awesome. Like I said, we got to KC and it was very understaffed, which is usually the interaction. Uh, we had a total of 300 players. There were 100 singles, if I remember right, and then 200 on the team. And we had less than 6 judges on the floor
Well,
for 40K. So it was a very hectic and crazy experience. I do enjoy it, though. It's a lot of fun, make a lot of friends. Jeremy, I'm a veteran and I work with a veteran nonprofit, and I'm actually organizing an all veterans team to kind of go out
Oh,
and
cool.
promote that nonprofit. And so I got to meet some veterans there and interact with them and kind of build and grow that community as well. My channel is pretty cool, I think. Hopefully everybody else does too. But I try to take a competitive bent to 40K, but break it down in a way so that non-competitive players can kind of apply those fundamentals and just get better at the game. Like, I'm not trying to teach people how to play the meta. I'm just trying to teach people how to play better so that if they go to a tournament, they're not just getting dogged on by, anybody who has whatever's meta. They can maybe feel confident about going to a tournament and at least maybe winning more games than they lose. And that's really the goal of the channel, is to just help educate people, try to break it down so it's easily digestible for people, and just help everybody be better at the game and have more fun. And that's the goal of the channel. And really, I got started on the channel because of a structure fire. So I used to run a local game store, and that's actually what got me back into 40K. And a year ago to today, almost today, the whole thing, apartment and everything, burned to the ground. And
oh man, I'm sorry. Oh
no,
my
no, no, don't
gosh.
apologize, because in some ways it was the best thing that ever happened to me, man. Like, genuinely. Um, America, I don't know if you guys are all in Canada based. I know Jeremy is. Um,
Nah, not all of us. Tim's in Florida. I'm in Philly.
okay, so you
Yep.
guys are aware of how insurance works, and it's
Yep.
not the best interaction. And the insurance company found a loophole to legally get out of paying for anything. So I just literally lost like $500,000. My whole life was just like gone in an instant. And man, I remember looking at my wife and just being like, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do? And I took a couple weeks off and just decided to get into content creation. And it's been a slow grind, but man, has it been enjoyable. I've connected with people from across the pond. Like, I've got friends in the UK that are watching my channel and sharing it, and just learning, and just it's been a cool experience to just grow a community and be a part of that. And that's, to me, what 40K is all about. It's just building and growing the community. So
That's awesome,
For
man.
sure.
I mean, it's also like fully aligned, I think, with what Stat Check broadly is about, and then like what we're here doing at X and One, just like get people to win more games they lose, get them better over time, try to find a way to balance this like crazy adult life and adult pressures and the ups and downs that come with it.
yep.
With try to play this game and participate and improve.
Yeah, it's been content creation has been really fun. I first and foremost, I love playing the game, but yeah, content creation has definitely been, I think, pretty fun. I get myself kind of drawn back to it over and over again. People have asked me about it. I said the biggest thing is like, if you end up making money doing it, like cool, but just don't do it unless you'd be willing to do it for free.
Mm.
Because that's like the best way to manage your expectations. A lot of the conversations we have here, I mean, they're a little bit more PC, obviously, because once it's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. It gets taken quoted out of context, or someone's just like will interpret it in bad faith or whatever. So you don't want to like avoid all that, obviously. But a lot of the conversations I have here are like, and the opinions I express and everything is not too dissimilar from like me just like talking with like my teammates and stuff like that, you know, at the bar next to the game store after like we have a couple like games or something like that. And we're just bullcrap, you know, bullshitting. And lots of, I've heard people say that they're like, oh, why don't you just like have like a podcast or a show or whatever? And like one day we finally were just like, yeah, why don't we just do that, you know? Because all it is just letting people in on the conversations we were having anyways. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know why people like to listen to it, but they do. So I don't know. Lord knows I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. So let's do a little catching up. Cliff, I think it's been 3 weeks since our last show.
So
maybe almost 4. It's been a minute.
Almost 4. Yeah, it's been a minute.
What have you been up to?
Man, what's been going on? Real life has been crazy. Professional life has been very crazy. Personal life has been tough, but with a bright spot last weekend where my grandma celebrated her 90th birthday in Ohio on the farm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Back there, and like
man.
all my aunts and uncles but one, and every cousin but one showed up. So it was like 70 people there, just about, just getting after it, which was great. And 40K wise, closed out these chaos nights. It was just like 6 war dogs as part of this slow grow league. That was cool. Got this Rust hobby approach down, I think. Also very fun. And now I'm just sitting and watching all these indexes roll out. I'm like, oh wow, like every faction that I have in play and care about is suddenly quite good. I've never before experienced so many playable options. So that's been cool. And then, you know, just sort of watching both the, you know, huge data guy. So seeing sort of the stated design intent of the team and watching how that's playing out in real time through rules reveals and through gameplay mechanics and interactions with factions, and having a strong aversion to what is happening with some factions and their level of output versus what the supposed stated intent of the game design was. But yeah, there's more to talk about that. More to talk about that later.
Hell yeah. Congratulations on your grandmother's birthday.
Yeah,
my grandmother actually she just turned 30 or not 30, 90.
What?
So I have to explain it. Well, Florida, you know. But she just turned 90 a few weeks ago too. Called wish her a happy birthday. We're gonna fly. I'm gonna take the wife and the kid up there. She's in the greater DC area. And I think we're going to go up there like this fall and go see some of her family, do some sightseeing, stuff like that.
That's fun.
As you can tell by the show title, I have not been playing 9th edition. Been playing a little bit of a bastardized 10th edition based on little pieces and tidbits of info. But, you know, it's kind of like when 9th edition was starting to get drip fed to us. It's not... I don't know how much value was actually there because we played a bastardized version of 9th edition. You know, we filled in the gaps with 8th edition rules and points and everything. And 2 months later, we were doing something completely different anyhow once we had the full picture. So who knows how much it really tells us. Some stuff is immediately obvious, though. I'm sure if you've been anywhere remotely online in a 40K kind of environment, you've probably seen some gnashing and wailing of teeth, which is probably a little bit maybe somewhat justified, but I don't know. Every time there's an edition change, it's always a complete dumpster fire. So I'm just kind of looking forward to that. But yeah, been playing some D4. Been just waiting for the drip feed to come out, and that's really been it. So speaking of, let's start talking about 10th edition. I know everyone's just tuning in and wants us to give our absolute worst takes for the take god, and I'm just going to like give the worst absolute takes, and I'm just going to be like super excited about it, and I'm just going to stake all my personal identity and clout on it. Okay, so like let's do that.
Those are the
I'm actually very excited because I've been narrowing my band a little bit to Chaos and Orcs,
Ooh.
and literally 83% of Chaos looks playable. That's 5 out of 6 in mathematicians. What 5 of the Chaos books look really good. One of them looks the opposite of that. And then Orcs look really good. I don't know if they're going to be able to hang with like kind of the top level because there's a big gap between like the upper middle and the top. But that book actually looks like it has a lot of depth. That index has more depth than the 9th edition codex does. So I'm excited to explore that. Very excited. I've been buying a bunch of Orc, a bunch of Chaos stuff. My backlog is now huge. Yeah, just out of frame, there is my second Lord of Change in a box and an unhealthy amount of Nurglings.
Love it.
Hint, hint. I can say it now. I can say it now because I bought them all. So you can't. Like I've already got mine. So yeah. I would. I like Nurglings a lot. I'm very excited about it. Even though they're OC2, I think they're going to be useful. What about you guys? What do you want to talk about first? You guys want to talk about I think all the indexes are out now. We just are waiting on point submissions.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Chris, what are you getting into? What are your factions played? What have you been most excited about?
I am an Orc player first, and I have been since 3rd edition. And this index, I like it a lot. Everything in it looks moderately playable outside of some of the shooting. The shooting looks kind of disappointing. The shooting was pretty disappointing in 9th, and I just feel like that's kind of carrying over. There's not a lot of AP on the guns, so the AP reduction that they got kind of stings. But there's a few kind of like diamonds in the rough there. Like the shock attack gun has some pretty neat combos. Like you can throw it in a transport, give the transport +1 to hit, and then he can be hitting on 4. So there's some good stuff in there. The melee looks pretty solid. Getting sustained hits, like obviously the Goffs look. I mean, it's all it is. It's just a Goffs bonus. So the melee looks solid. All the B Snagga stuff looks good. I wasn't surprised there. Those are the newest models. Not that I'm about Games Workshop, but and then really my second army is Drukhari, and that was kind of a rough index for me to look through. Like it's all over the place in terms of like power level. There's no consistency. Witches and witch cult stuff kind of looks really lackluster and going to be kind of tough in my opinion. Without having the context of playing it, obviously. But like all the homunculus stuff still looks solid. It's got the feel no pains and all the other stuff that makes it, a little bit more durable. So I feel like early on, I think you're going to see a lot of Cabalites because the shooting is still pretty solid. And I think the Venoms just look amazing. The ability to give them sticky objectives with the Cabalite squads and then being able to get out and get back in, stuff like that. I think the Venoms look really solid. But I think outside of Cabalites, maybe you see some Racks and you see some Talos. Chronos look a little lackluster to me. Again, not surprised. They got put out. They got put in the timeout box in 9th edition, and they're probably not coming back for a bit. So
I can see a world where you want like maybe like one Chronos because
Yep.
just being able to refund those pain
get
tokens
those
and
get those
everything, like
tokens. Yep.
you can kind of get like a little bit of like a recursive effect going on. If you're a little bit hot on like rolling to regen your resources, next thing you know, like one pain token could end up giving like full rerolls to like 3 or 4 different units. If you just can roll a couple 4-ups a couple times in a row. So I see like a world where you take like one.
Yeah.
Maybe just put it behind a wall.
I think the Talos just like if you have to pick one or the other, I think the Talos just are the automatic pick points depending.
Yeah.
Because once they kill a unit, they're just always powered. So you're just re-rolling hits and wounds pretty much all the time then. And the Haywire is just like super silly. It's just a mortal wound gun towards vehicles. And then like things like crisis suits going to vehicles, you're just like, hey, pick them up. I don't care about your invuln, just pick them up.
Yeah.
So,
I like Talos a lot. My understanding was that Incubi during playtesting were pretty strong, and at some point, like they basically said, "Hey, let's kind of like this is not okay," and then they like overcorrected, and that kind of left the range without like a heavy hitting melee unit because usually most armies that have like either a wide range of units or melee armies will usually have 2 different types of melee units. You'll have like a fast melee unit that's designed to go into screens and light infantry and usually has a lot of volume. and then you'll have like kind of like a heavier unit that's used to go into like the good stuff. And Incubi were definitely the latter.
Yeah.
But without that being there, like it almost now you have to kind of do that with Grotesques and Talos, and I think Grotesques will be like kind of okay with it, but they're more like they almost feel like more like a bruiser type role,
Yeah.
versus like straight up offense of what
Yeah.
Incubi were. Talos are insane, but with being capped to the size of 2,
Yeah.
kind of like more of like an all rounder kind of thing. Whereas like they can't, when you only have 2 dudes, you can't really go into a full health unit, pure melee, and then just and then expect them to like 100 to 0 a unit. So they'll probably need some help some sort of way. But I do think
Sure.
the shooting looks great compared to 9th
Yeah.
edition. So I think that's going to be a way to go.
And yeah, grotesques are pretty much like a tar pit. Like that's how I've always looked at them. Like where can I just stick them and make neither one of us go anywhere? And that's always been my goal with them is like, okay, I'm just gonna slow you down. But yeah, no, those are the 2 that I play the most. I dabble in sisters. Sisters look like sisters. Like it doesn't look like a ton has changed there.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got no complaints there. But that's it, man.
Cool.
Like that orc
Yeah.
index, pretty happy.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And by the way, Cliff usually has internet issues. There he is back again. Yeah, I know exactly why he's shaking his head. His internet's fine, but it just doesn't like StreamYard for some reason.
Sure.
It's one of those things we'll just never figure it out. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to look too much at Sisters. I've mostly been picking up on the buzz / salt from other people. My initial vibe that I was getting from it was you just take triple Exorcist and MSU to power your Exorcist. So I'm like, that kind of sucks. That's not really why you want to play. Yeah, like I want to play a bunch of angry ladies, but
Well, and the Exorcists definitely look good. Like they've
Yeah,
got the
it looked
indirect
good, for
fire.
sure.
Yeah. Repentia don't look terrible.
not bad. They lost a pip of AP and they lost
Yep.
an attack, but they now have really easy access to reroll hits and wounds.
Yep.
So that's pretty good.
That's good.
Not bad.
How are Paragon Warsuits? They get a glow up at all or not?
They decent to me.
I'm trying to think because I don't feel like they changed a ton, but now I'm going off of memory.
Well, they have a 4-up invuln baseline now.
Yep,
Oh.
they've got the 4-up invuln, and then Morven Vol can get attached to them, and then she gives them a bunch of buffs. But as a standalone data sheet, like they're I would argue they're slightly better than they were, but I don't feel like it's a huge improvement.
It's one of those like points dependent.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, for sure. It's
just get a banner that says that.
Yeah,
like Grant said, there's still vehicles.
Oof.
And yeah, that opens you up to just getting like blasted on a 2-up by certain things in the game. So it's a little bit rough. But they seem, looking at the data sheet in a vacuum, I'm gonna just pull a random number. They seem about 10 to 15%, maybe about 10% better than what they were.
Yeah,
on a pure stats wise. Now, how that relates to the rest of the game and the points and everything, who knows? But they look like they honestly made an honest try at making them look good, but not good to the point where they crowd out everything else in the book.
Well, like Zephyrim looked pretty solid in the context of 10th. Like part of the complaints I've seen is just like, well, they're -2 because they're power weapons, and it's like, yeah, but all power weapons are just -2 now.
Right.
So it's not like only Zephyrim got smacked with that. That's just how the game interacts. But like within the context of 10th, they look pretty solid, especially because you can now put Celestine in them. And then Celestine will revive a bodyguard model, so she can just keep bringing back Zephyrim as long as they're alive.
That's great.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool. I always thought Celestine with like in just leading a whole bunch of like the jump pack sisters, like always just felt super iconic. So that's really cool. I remember kind of glancing at the mortifiers and the Paragon Warsuits because that was always kind of like a favorite part of sisters for me. It was all the weird like Imperial like and Ecclesiarchy hangers on. And like I said, I didn't deep dive too much into it, but what I saw, I liked a lot of attacks. If they take the same type of weapon, which most people usually build their walkers that way, you get twin linked.
Yep.
So that's obviously pretty good. Rerolling wounds. So that's cool. I definitely, it definitely seems like a Mech Sisters build might have some legs,
Well, like the
in a
Penitent
vacuum.
engines are pretty solid looking too. They don't get the invuln that
Mhm.
the Mortifiers do, but their flamers are now assault, so you can advance, shoot, and charge just all the time.
Yeah,
So
I
that
think the
keeps them
flamers are ignore
interacting.
cover too.
Yep, yep.
Yep.
And it just keeps them
Ooh,
interacting every phase, and that's what you
yeah,
want out of those.
I like
Yeah.
that. What's
Yep.
what's the unit size? Is that 1 to 2, 1 to 3?
Oh, I would have to look. I think it's 1 to 3, but it might be 1 to 2.
Just having flashbacks of trying to run. This is like pre New Sisters book, but having a buddy that in ninth edition just like ran a wall of mortifiers at me. I was like playing Deathwatch at the time, which just wasn't great, and just being like, I have 2 turns to figure this out. I've not figured it out yet, and
Right.
yeah.
Let's see. I actually have the index pulled up right now. And my computer's dying because I just opened up like 80 PDFs. Mortifier. Let's see. Mortifiers are.
Penitents are 1 to 2.
Yep, mortifiers are 1 to 2 as well, which
Yep.
is that's like what the box has, so that's fine.
Well, and that's the other thing I've noticed with the index is everything is just like, what do you get in a box? You can either take
Yeah.
1 box or 2 boxes. That's it.
Multiple of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they kind of stopped messing around with the whole understrength units or stuff like that, and they just pulled the
Mhm.
plug. They're like, hey man, increments of box size, which they've definitely made a. That's a pretty good. This might derail the rest of the conversation about 10th, but it's a pretty good segue that we were talking about in the Discord today. They definitely have made it more less obtuse.
Mhm.
Or less
More accessible.
more accessible for newer players and
Yeah.
new blood to get into the game. There's just that push pull of like, well, how do we make this game easier to get into for newer players without invalidating like the stuff that older players have, and like not to get into social commentary, but like there's it's like the idea of like student loan forgiveness. People. So obviously, some people are for it because they immediately benefit from it, or they are like, "Oh, this seems like a good thing." Other people are just kind of like, other people have like a real idea where they're like, "Okay, well, there's a cost to it," and then you have the people who are only against it because they're past the point where it doesn't benefit them because they paid off their student loans. They're like, well, if I had to suffer, everyone past me has to suffer. So, not to get too deep into that,
Yeah.
but it's certainly a take, and I'm
Sure.
definitely putting myself out there to be blasted. But it's kind of like if I had to suffer through this hobby being expensive, does the hobby need to be expensive for new people to come after me? Like I feel like it shouldn't. When I started playing the game, all the models were metal. It was incredibly expensive to play the game. The armies were smaller, and people didn't really jump armies as much. The tournaments weren't really a thing, but
they wouldn't.
Yeah, like I'm of an opinion. Like just because the hobby was inaccessible for me, like doesn't mean that it should be inaccessible for people that follow me just so I can maintain my status quo. But that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah. I think, and if you're one of the people that holds that opinion, because like if it's hard for me, if there's some sort of inherent value to being more difficult for other people, you're being left behind. There's so many sources of information about the game, how to hobby better, how to better spend your time, how to build your.
Like a great example that like I don't think really a lot of people are talking about. There's a lot of people out there that have 27 Beast of Nurgle, real ones. There are people out there that have that. Yeah, and you know how many Beasts of Nurgle you can field in an army now? 6. I'm sorry. It's all like when all those people like went out and bought like 9 of each type of competitive like orc buggy. I'm like, bro, there's a concept called overexposure. Like when you're like messing with stocks and stuff like that. That is the peak example of Warhammer metagaming. Like overexposure is when you do
27 Tyranid warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I've seen that.
Who knows how many Razorwing flocks from way back when? Yeah.
So yeah, I guess like to come back around again, because I think it was Grant and McWork that were basically asked about the question, like, how do you feel about edition changes and stuff like that invalidating people's collections? It sucks. It's always going to suck. However, there's a difference between when it's done arbitrarily, and then there's a difference where it's done with the design intention to make the game more accessible for like for new people. And if it's the second one, then like, hey, the secondhand market for models is always real robust. You know, like it sucks to have your stuff invalidated, but like there are people looking to get into the hobby that don't have different budgets and are looking for quality used models that have been loved and taken care of, and they will give the models a new home, and they will take it.
Well, and like some of these models that are getting invalidated can just end up like if they're legends, for example, you can run them as other things in a lot of
Yeah.
instances as well. Like my only real gripe about what's in the box is when you've got the really old kits like Tank Bustas. Like that is an old fine cast unit, and it's like now I can take 5 Tank Bustas, I get 3 rockets, I get 1 pistol, 1 hammer. That's it. So like that kind of is just like, all right, that's a little silly. But the one thing I tell people when they're complaining about is like, keep in mind this is index. The whole thing could change when the
Yeah,
codexes
things
come
will
out.
change.
Like the indexes are designed to be as easy as possible for everybody to get into the game while they write rules. So just be patient,
Yep.
see how
Yeah.
it develops once the Marine book and the Tyranid book come out. We're gonna have a much better understanding of where the edition's gonna be.
Yeah, part of me wants to also be a little bit charitable to GW here in the fact that a lot of like right now, what a lot of people do, like with a lot of companies are doing with like video games, is they do a little bit of alpha testing, they do a little bit of beta testing, and then they release the game, and people play the game and they're having fun, but at the same time they're like, "Yo, this game is buggy as all hell. Like, what the heck, you know?" But you know, that company has like a freeze on like using personal days, using vacation days, and everything. They're like, hey, we need all hands on deck because like the 2 weeks before launch and then 2 weeks after launch, the offices are going to be on fire, you know?
Yeah.
So we need like everyone here. And we don't really have access to like the telemetry that GW is going to be using to monitor, but you know, at Stat Check, we obviously monitor a lot of stuff like that. And I know that we've had GW eyes on the product that we put out. So part of me thinks, or is at least hopeful, that we are basically crowdsourcing the playtesting of 10th a little bit, because I've gotten some insight into the playtesting, and it's a little, but one thing that is generally you can always kind of count on is wisdom of the crowds. Like, yeah, people like go onto Reddit and go onto Facebook and have just terrible takes, but generally, like the silent community, when you look at the stats, when you look at the Wednesday recaps on Goonhammer, they are very quick to find what the busted most effective thing is, and then congregate that and then streamline that. And that happens very quickly, actually. And you end up with like these lists for like Eldar, for Harlequins, you know, for Tyranids, and like the first 1,800 points all looks the same generically, and the lists kind of converge, you know. And at that point, GW, you know, or anyone else would look at it and be like, okay, clearly like this is a problem, so we need to adjust this. Either this is a little too cheap for what it's doing, or there's an unhealthy interaction, blah 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 blah. If they can do that and fold it into the codexes that drop, I think 10th edition will be very good. If they take the the rough spots around the indexes and they basically just use this as an extended beta, so to speak, for 10th edition, and then as we get into our codexes, the game becomes very smooth. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it, from the best way to ground your gameplay for the next 3 months, is to understand like your gameplay is essentially being used to inform the actual 1.0 version of the game that'll come out after the first sort of bounce pass. And you just can't do it at the speed that video games can. Like Diablo can do an early release for people that buy it, and they get to play for a week. And that week is actually just like the most motivated people playing the game a lot, providing way more information about what bugs there are and what needs to be revised before it goes out to the general public. So like that's not really mechanically possible with the tabletop war game. So, take that for what it is. But also know that like that means that, to Tim's point, like the game's going to be buggy as fuck for the next 3 months, and it just is what it is.
Yeah. Enjoy the madness. I mean, just if you want to just be a salty Splatoon, I guess like it's a free world mostly. You can do that too. But oh my god. Oh.
Right.
For anyone who was around in 7th edition,
ride the wave.
Just got PTSD from seeing.
Yeah.
Oh
man. David, no, don't sell your army if you're an AdMech player. If you're an AdMech player with a lovingly crafted army, because that faction looks fantastic. Don't sell it. Just like, but like, I'm also not going to sit here and try to gaslight you and be like, your army's great, bro. It's your problem. Like, find something good in it. Like someone else on the internet.
Skill issue.
On those lines. like it sucks when the thing that you like is made worse. Like that's not fun. But also, like, just as a general rule, do not sell your painted stuff that you really like. Like, your time will come. It's all cyclical. AdMech was crazy like a year and a half ago. They got toned down. It'll be all right.
Yeah, well, I'm not very warm on the AdMech index, but who knows? Maybe the codex will be fine. I definitely want to see everything on the table a couple times first.
Points are really gonna for AdMech especially. Points are gonna drive that army, because like if Castellans are still really cheap, they're gonna be pretty solid. If the Breachers are cheap, they're gonna be pretty solid. But if everything's overpointed, like that is just gonna be a tough army to do anything with.
Yeah. Speaking of armies, Cliff, I don't think we got a chance to ask you. Tell us about. I mean, you gave us a hint already, but what are you excited about? Like your first 2 or 3 months of 10th edition, you're gonna be playing.
Oh my god! So like, I am Custodes forever, right? And they look great in the index. Like, not.
You've only got half your army.
Yeah, like I'm.
You see the Forge World stuff.
This is what's crazy. Like I'm like done collection wise and hobbying wise for so many of the factions. I'm just like, this is like I can just pick stuff up off the shelf and go. Like this is amazing. Like the index, the reveals so far are just like, man, this army absolutely slams in close combat exactly the way that it should. Feels fluffy, remarkably durable, just like surprising amount of output it ranged, and like, yeah, I'm just pumped, man. It's gonna be so fun. My other like in my top 3, it's really like Custodes number 1, and then Imperial Knights and Deathwatch close behind. And like Knights look great too. The towering keyword is probably problematic, but
probably a mistake.
I will roll with that for the next 3 months. It's going to be great to shoot it whatever the hell you want. They're super durable. It's going to be great. And I think also with the Imperial Knights specifically, they were able to like re-incentivize people taking more big boys, given that they also benefit from the bondsman notes now, which is great. And like their output is crazy. They're super durable. That's exciting. And Deathwatch for a minute was just like egregious. And because kicking out 40 to 60 mortal wounds from a single unit in shooting phase was like not good at all. So
it's probably fine.
Probably it's probably okay.
You have a 6 up field of pain, right? It'll be fine.
Yeah,
it's a feature, not a bug.
Just roll 6s. Glad that they fixed that, like essentially in real time. That bodes well for their capacity to intervene quickly when it is warranted. But that book, it just cooks still. So I'm really excited about that. Hobbying up some Sternguard, it's like my side hustle, aside from these beautiful Wraith-themed units. Yeah, so like a long time ago, I bought all those like old Eldar Star collectings with the Wraith Lord, the Farseer, the Wraith Guard, and the Warwalker. I bought like 4 boxes though, so they're like super cheap on Amazon.
Yeah, that was super good box.
Yeah, killed it. That box is such a great deal. And I was just like, oh, I'm gonna build like a Wraith army at some point. That'd be so cool. So I got all these Wraith Guard, a couple of Hemlock Wraith Fighters, a couple of Wraith Knights, some of the Wraith Seer conversion bits, like that sort of thing. And I've just been waiting, and like now it's time. Now it's time. This will be my new faction hobby project, and I'll just throw D cannons with devastating wounds across the table at everything else with every model in my army, and then be happy. And by my opponent at the end.
Yeah, I'm very, like I said, I'm excited about orcs. I'm excited to explore that index. There's just like a few peripherals I need, like just some random buggies that I don't have. I have 3 battle wagons, but like one was like an eBay rescue, one's a Land Raider, and one's a one is man, what's that?
I love it.
Yeah, one's not even. It's a GW model, but it's from another game. I'm drawing a blank. It's that big cargo container semi truck thing.
The Necromunda thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The Ridge Hauler. That thing is sick.
Yeah, it's that thing. Yeah, I don't actually have like a true 100% real battle wagon. At some point, I want to rectify that.
You're doing it right.
I looked at the data sheet; it just has everything, and I'm like, oh, I have something that looks like a battle wagon, but doesn't have everything, so I kind of just want to have everything. And then I think I need another box too of flash kits, and then a couple of the characters. But I'm actually pretty solid there. My local store, there is a Thousand Sons boarding patrol that I go in once a week after work. I just walk in there and they say, "Hey Tim, do you need anything?" And I said, "No, I'm just looking." And I go in there and I just make deep eye contact with that boarding patrol for about 5 minutes. And then I talk myself out of it and I walk out. I'm just going to go until it's not there anymore, or I'm just going to break down. But I did pick up a used Magnus for $100 and I felt like a champion. So he doesn't have the armor, but I don't care. Like I just got Magnus in good condition for $100 even. So that's cool.
Great. Yeah. I mean, you gotta model that guy with his chest out anyway, right? Like, come on.
Of course. Suns out, guns out. Speaking of guns out, I also am chasing down a lead for a really good deal on a pair of Knight Castellans / Valiants, because I think the Knight Tyrant has some play, both versions. So I'm kind of rounding out my collection there. And we're just working on a lot of chaos. My World Eaters is complete. I have a CSM backlog that I need to do because I really like Possessed. I really like a Blitz. I still have Abaddon. Never got rid of them. And demons I've been fleshing out, Earthlings, and that's it. It's really nice. I don't, except for the CSM and possibly 1,000 Suns. There's no army I had to really build like from the ground up. It's just like adding a unit or two there. So I'm really excited to test all that stuff out. So, no idea what I'll be playing for Team USA or if I'm even going to be on the starting team. Like we still haven't decided that yet, but Monday is the start of the grind fest, so
oh boy,
little bit of reading the indexes, a lot of trying to get my last couple of days of Diablo 4 in before we just started. I knew I shouldn't have added the team captain as a friend on Diablo. Shit,
you blew it.
Yeah, I blew it. So, but I'm excited for that. I'm definitely excited to kind of like break the game a little bit. Chris, what about you? I know you talked about orcs and Dark Elder a little bit, but like anything like you're really going to try to be doing like events wise or like army wise?
Well, so as far as events go, I'll actually be down at Tampa this October playing the Open. I won't be working, and I'll be playing it.
Hell yeah, might meet you because I'm planning to go to that.
Hell yeah, man!
Trying to go to that, man.
I'm pretty pumped. I'm going to be, as far as like lists and theory crafting. I was running Evil Sons late in 9th. I'm like the only idiot that was running that sub faction. And man, like I feel like it's going to have some pretty good interactions in 10th based on how the WA now works and just like everything kind of working. So if I can build like a bike heavy. What's
yes.
All right, Ben. The 29th, Ben. The 29th is going to be the next RTT in Plymouth, buddy. But hell yeah, man. I love it. That's awesome. My big hobby project is I have a Bane Blade sitting about 4 feet from me, and it's going to get turned into a kill tank as soon as I get the Imperial armor stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I run a lot of events. So we've got like I've just got events coming up that I'm running. As far as playing goes, it's whenever I get time. Like the big event that I'm doing right now is just the Tampa Open.
Mhm.
Um, Outside of that, it's just do I have time? Then I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us, that's a good segue, man. I think all of us here are parents with significant others. Like, how do you find time to deal with stuff? Like, how do you compartmentalize everything? Like, how do you, your time management? Like, what's been just generic stuff that like generally works for you? Like, any tips or anything? I know we have a lot of listeners that are always just like, how do I do this?
The big thing for me is like you got to have the conversation. Like if you're married and you have kids, you got to have that conversation with your wife. Like
Mhm.
you got to be like, hey, look, I need a night, whether it's for hobbying or playing or whatever, and then you can have a night, and I'll take the kids. Like you got to be willing to make that trade off. I think that's the most important thing. So
Yep.
like my Fridays are always mine. It's usually a bunch of us going out, play 40K, drink a few beers, have a good time, and then a lot of times her Thursday or her Saturday, she'll go do whatever she wants to with her friends, and just being able to have that trade off so we both get our hobby time, our whatever we need time. And that's been the big thing. Fortunately, my kids are a little bit older. Like my two kids, my youngest is 8 and he'll be 9 here pretty soon. So he's not like super old, obviously, but he's at least old enough that I'm not having to change his diapers and wipe his butt and stuff. And so and he actually likes painting and building. So a lot of times, if I'm hobbying, he's just sitting at a table with me hobbying.
Oh, that's
So
fun.
that's actually a pretty cool interaction. Is just being able to sit down with him, and I think we got him. We're building a diorama right now together, so it's just like a big hill with a commissar, and he's shooting a war boss, and there's just like a bunch of guardsmen going to be all over it, just like killing each other with the orcs and stuff. And he is just having a blast with that. So
Awesome. Question from Ben from the chat. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. He
yeah,
says, Chris, when's the next RTT you're holding?
Yeah, I actually saw that and already answered him. It's the 29th of July at Got Game in Plymouth. It's going to be an RTT. And then I'm working with another local store so we can start doing one within the next month. So July, August, and then I'll run one in September also. So I'll have 3 coming up within the next 3 months.
So
Awesome. Hell yeah. Yeah, it's having that conversation is obviously like super important. And then it's gonna I don't want to bury the lead too much because this is a question from one of the guys in one of our patrons in the Discord. But yeah, and then you also have to kind of like tailor it to your life situation. Cindy and I are both my wife, we're both shift workers. With weird days off. Like I'm Thursday, Fridays off, and then Cindy is Wednesday, Thursday. Um, so there's times like every second or third week, a lot of times where I'm doing this show on Thursday, and then like if I work 6 days a week and the city works 6 days a week or something like that, like we might just have weeks where we just like miss each other. A lot of times. I'm moving my schedule forward. She's moving her schedule back, gives us coverage for the kids, stuff like that. And again, we just don't see each other. There's been times where, I've had the opportunity to go out and get games, or I've had the opportunity to go to an event. And I'm just kind of like, well, I haven't really seen my kid in a while, and I haven't seen like my wife in a while. And you just make that decision, and it's not like I have to, like, hopefully for most people, like I want to see them. I like my family,
Right.
and I would also like to stay married and have privacy. So, and then there's also a lot of people who unfortunately, like maybe like thankfully I have a pretty good relationship with my dad. But that was because he was present, and I know talking to like several people who were not so lucky, I know like how important that is, especially for a young kid. So a lot of times, like I think in the long term, I'm like, you know what? There's no real events that I really care enough about in the next 6 months. I'm fine just playing locals and my teammates, save a little bit of money, and most importantly, like my kid gets to see me be present. I'm not always gone because I'd rather go play toy soldiers than be with my kid. On the flip side, sometimes 40K is my escape. So when like we talk about like Cliff kind of mentioned it, when work life is getting rough, family life is getting rough, stuff like that, you got to cross your T's and dot your I's, but you also need that escape. And then my wife understands that because we've had that discussion. same thing with her. She has stuff that she does to escape, and a lot of times, like I just take the kid. I'm like, hey, you got to do your thing, you know. But again, like you said, it's part of that discussion. It's also going to depend on, you know, your jobs, your career,
Yep.
you know, home life, and then like also how old your kid is. That's another one that I don't think we talk about enough. How old your kid is really makes a big difference on the dynamic of how much you can travel and go do stuff.
Yeah.
Cliff,
I think
hey, Cliff.
it's just like, I don't know. It's broadly speaking, I don't think there's enough acknowledgement, at least in the US, of how difficult it is to have kids and like attempt to really be present in their lives, especially when they're young. And especially if you don't have access to the sort of like free family support childcare that some people have access to, it can be tough. Like, for example, my son is calling me now. I don't know what he's calling me for, but I'm going to go check on it. I'll be back in a sec.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, feel free to go check on it. But yeah, it's a big thing. I think what I'm going to do now, because we're almost, we're about 45 minutes in. Our little like discussions, stuff like that. There's like the Venn diagram of the discussions and our questions are almost becoming a circle. So I'm just going to like kind of roll into the questions. Bear with me, I'm ready. That, or I don't know if you've only been on our Discord for a day, Chris, but it's a little bit chaotic there, and everything. There's more suggestions rather than hard and fast rules.
Right.
So let's see. Here's a good one.
Oh boy!
If we're just so you know, we're starting the questions because a lot of the conversations kind of go into question route anyhow.
Hey, cool.
Hey,
they should all be pinned.
Yep. Yeah, I just suck at reading. Okay, here we go. From Adrian, I'm sorry. There's like I have like 8 or 9 different windows open. From Adrian Az, any tips for keeping hobby motivation up on models that are moved to Horus Heresy Legend? Rip the 2 plastic Leviathans I just picked up. I've noticed that airbrush sessions are fewer and far between with the 4-month-old. I wish I had advice to give you on that one. I did not see the retirement of the Horus Heresy line to only Horus Heresy. I did not see that coming at all.
Yeah, it was odd.
Odd is a nice way of putting it. I think that was a very bad faith move.
Actually, pretty fucked up. Yeah,
that could have been really telegraphed a lot better because a lot of those models were present in 40K for a long time, and the window that they were plastic and playable in 40K was entirely too short. I really think that should have been, that should have been like at least a year's notice, you know, like on that one, because people made some really big, you know, because not everyone can just like absorb that hit. Like that might have been some people's like hobby budget for 6 months for the year, you know.
Yeah.
Like the kits are expensive, and now they're just kind of like, now what? So unfortunately, I don't know what advice to give you. If you are Adrian, if you play Horus Heresy, or if you have a local group that play Horus Heresy, then I would definitely try to find your motivation through that, because it sounds like your hobby motivation is very rules driven, versus hobbyist driven. So I would definitely try to do that. If not, and I know this sounds like a cop out, but like I would honestly recoup the cost on those, and even though you won't get every penny back on the dollar that you spent on that, at least you can put that money towards something that will make you happy and spark joy. Because just if you're not a hobbyist and you're just painting models that you're never going to use, like, and you find yourself not wanting to do it, like, I think you should just not try to force yourself, because that's going to force you to burn out in the hobby on the large.
There might be one out, Chris. It'd be interesting to hear your take on this, given your experience as the Ben runner. But like, I'm like looking at the Leviathan, looking at the Redemptor. There's a way to hobby. You could base these such that they can proxy as the other. Now I think same vibe for the Contemptors, right? Like depending on how you arrange the base and position the model, you might be able to slide a proxy in. And use
and really the main thing is just having, again, that conversation with the TO. Because like as a person who runs events, if one of my players says, hey, I've got this Leviathan and I want to run it as a Redemptor, it's on the proper base size. and it's within a half inch of all directions of being the right dimensions. As a TO, hell yeah, man. Use your models, have fun. As long as they're painted and they look good, I'm happy.
Right.
As far as anything dealing with the move to Legends, I'm actually not allowed to talk about it, just so you guys know. As a
Oh,
Games Workshop employee, so it's not a conversation that I get to participate in. So
Well, I do
I
appreciate
see.
you letting us know that. So definitely not
Okay.
trying to bait you there,
no, no,
but
no, and that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to be upfront about it. Like, I'll
cool.
definitely give recommendations on what they can do, but as far as like the bad feels, all I can do is like, man, I'm super sorry, and I 100% get it, but it's not a conversation that I get to give an opinion on.
Yeah, totally understandable. But yeah, that's I don't know, Cliff, if you have any further advice, but like my feeling is mostly condolences. It sucks. It does
Yeah.
suck, and I will validate you on that. That it's a bad feeling. There's no
It's
real way
hard.
around it.
Yeah. It's just tough. Find proxies if you can. If that doesn't make you happy, I think like Tim said, like, find somebody who will give it a home that'll make them happy.
Okay, so this is one that, and I don't have the picture ready, but this is one that GW employees definitely can talk about. From Dan F, what is everyone's hottest take on Stephen Box's Death Guard post in that Death Guard Facebook group? Man, it was basically, for context. Obviously, a lot of Death Guard players are unhappy about the power level, perceived or real, of
Yeah.
the Death Guard index. And I do feel like saying like wait for points could be a little bit of a cop out, because we generically know how many models a power armor army puts on the table. And from what I've seen in that index and what I've seen in the other index, they're not going to be cheap enough to put as many models on the table as they need to be
Nope.
probably hitting a 50% win rate into those other armies. That being said, that's with not having played the new missions, but generically, they're a slow army, and I don't think they're durable enough to make up for that. And generically, these new types of missions, especially if you go tactical, where you don't know what card you're going to flip over, those tend to favor like mobile fast armies, which is not what you think of when you think of Death Guard. So there is valid criticism there. That being said, obviously, some people like tend to get very emotionally invested. They maybe take it a little too far, and I think this is where Stephen Box comes in. Enter Stephen Box. I think he had intentions. He basically kind of said, hey, he basically told everyone more or less to kind of like tone down the salt, tone down the whining, blah, blah, blah. You could, with enough like, can-do attitude and practice, you can make anything work, blah, blah, blah. And that generally, the hot takes around this is that generally came across as disingenuous at best, or sorry, disingenuous at worst, and like tone deaf at best. Because Stephen Box, if you're not familiar from Vanguard Tactics, he is a good player, but he has preached a lot of like sticking with an army versus meta hopping. But in the past like year or two,
despite meta hopping,
he has definitely been played. He has definitely played Tau, Harlequins, his Blood Angels, of course, World Eaters. He's played a lot of meta armies, so it's like, and he used to not be that way. So I don't know what changed. And then when he came in with this message, he didn't even say like he was going to try to give Death Guard a shot. So kind of like, put his money where his mouth is. He was basically just coming in and telling a bunch of people to kind of like, hey, stop whining. So that's my hot take on it. Is it just came across a little bit tone deaf and not very self-aware either. So that happens, I guess. You guys have anything to add? I feel like I took over on that one, but
yeah, I mean, I have Tim, you're very polite. I think broadly speaking, most folks in GW content creating universe are very polite people. But there's this line between that was a bullshit take. Like Box's take was a bullshit take, right? There's two reasons why. There's
Cliff, I got banned from two different communities today. They don't want the truth. They don't want the truth, Cliff. They don't want it.
There's the very specific Death Guard specific reason why it was bullshit, and then there's a larger like meta conversation about like giving people space to be upset when something gets taken away from them. Like this game is about managing risk and existing in space successfully, right? And to be able to exist in space, you need to be able to move to those spaces and remain in them long enough to be effective. And like thus far, it doesn't appear that Death Guard are going to be effective at doing that, right? Like they're slow and they don't appear to be durable enough to offset that like lack of speed. That sucks. And like that was also the case for the 2 previous years. So if you're a Death Guard player, you're probably going to be disappointed, especially given what we're seeing from some of the other Index releases, right? Like that makes sense. 1. 2, it's ridiculous to scold people for like being sad when something that brings them joy and like that they have fun doing is made less fun. Like, yeah, bro, I'm gonna be upset about that. Like, I don't need a like opinion from on high from a content creator who's like really good at the game also to tell me like probably casual dad that plays once a month and like is gonna show up and get wrecked by like my friend's Eldar next Saturday. That like I need to like buck up. You know what I'm saying? Like that's come on, man. That's not cool. It's not
cool. Some real big bootstraps energy there.
Yeah, like what are we doing? like that Index is weak. It needs work. People are upset about it, especially if they have this collection. It's like the only faction they play or the only one that they care about, and it's okay to be upset about things being taken away from you. Like it's like 3 days old, man. Give them some space. It's all good.
I will say the one shiny little pearl in that gross, disgusting, pus-filled green clam is that Chaos Soup is back on the menu, baby. Like Chaos Soup is big time back. So I mean, it kind of sucks. Like it kind of sucks. Like, hey, the solution to Death Guard is add 1,000 points of stuff that's not Death Guard, and like figure something out. But I mean, like, hey, you have that option again. No, I mean, like you can literally add 500 points of demons with like no restrictions anymore. You don't have to like take any tax units or anything like that. Be like, hey, my army sucks. It just freaking sucks. And I can either try to shore up weaknesses, which by the way is everything, or I can try to lead into strengths, which in this case seems to be like nothing. But that's a thing you can do. Yeah. Like well, because you can like I was talking about it. I don't think it would actually fit in 500 points, but like you could. So you take your 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, which that would play a good unit, and then like I don't think 3 would fit. I doubt it, but like I said, I haven't seen points. But I would say like you take 2 of the Soul Grinders. For those who aren't aware, for demons, when you take a Soul Grinder or you take a Demon Prince. They come undivided, then you have to add a God keyword, and then they get that keyword, and they get a bunch of special rules depending what you take. For Soul Grinder, it's a weapon. And for the Nurgle one, you get basically a long-range indirect fire weapon. So for me, like that's kind of how I evaluate things. I'm kind of like, okay, well, if I have a squirt gun to my head and I have to play Death Guard, at least try to like make this a competitive army, if at least performative. And I'm like, okay, this is hard, man. It is durable, maybe not relatively durable, but like I'm assuming that was the intent of the army. And when they wrote it, they didn't get to look at anyone else's work. When GW and the class separated into like group projects, and you picked your friend, hey, pick me, I'm your partner, and they went over there and Death Guard, they're like, oh, it's gonna be cool. They didn't look at anyone else's work before they submitted their work to the teacher, unfortunately, and it shows. But I think the goal was to make their faction tough, So I would lean into that a little bit, which Soul Grinders are. They're like, I think like they're T something high. But then they have good indirect. That Plague Burst Crawler, that's a pretty good indirect platform. And I think indirect is going to be strong this edition. Yeah. And the Soul Grinder, when it's Nurgle, gets indirect. So now instead of having 3 good indirect pieces, you have 5 indirect pieces. And they're all relatively pretty chunky. Now, and then we continue that. You add a Knight Despoiler, which can take the double guns. I don't know what the guns you'd want to take are. I'd probably lean into... I didn't see a lot of stuff that really deals with vehicles in Death Guard, so I would probably try to go like double thermal cannon, because that would probably help with vehicles. Well, but Tim, Knights don't have access to indirect fire, and I say, aha, they do, because they have the towering keyword, which is one of the most messed up rules I've seen.
I am so excited about it. So
in the last like 10, 15 years of Warhammer, that is one of the most messed up rules I've seen. So I would add a double thermal cannon, Knight Despoiler, which you also get great value because you get a floating reroll to use on a hit or wound roll with that thing. And so now you have 5 indirect pieces and 4d3 strength yes, AP yes, damage yes guns with a built-in reroll that can see through obscuring terrain if you have like open windows or doors or something like that. At that point, like that actually sounds like a somewhat functional list, if at least it's a little bit janky. So that's kind of cool. Like Chaos Soup is back in the menu and it's cool. So that actually has me really excited.
Chris, what does it look like when players? I wonder if you encountered some of this at GW. Have you had players come into events that you're running and you're like, they submit their list, you're like, oof, it's gonna be tough for you, buddy. And then they get there and like maybe they do have a tough time. Like how do you sort of keep them engaged, in the game and like trying to have a good time? Like how do you solve
So,
that?
man, so like as a TO, obviously those players are usually hanging out in the back tables, right? And honestly, one of the things I try to do is just check in with them as a TO. Hey, how are you doing? Because like usually if a player comes with a list like that, they know where they're at skill level.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that because a lot of those guys are just coming out to play. Like this is their hobby time. If they win some games, awesome. If they don't, awesome. I don't think I've ever encountered one of those players who had the misconception that they were going to come in and just like shit roll everybody and just be like, I win. So it's one of those where a lot of those players, in my experience, they generally know where they're at skill level and they know what they're about, which is cool. But I always try to, like, as a TO, try to at least check on the bottom tables a little bit more than the top tables, just to make sure everybody's still doing all right. Because it's very easy for them to get mentally checked out. So for me, it's like I just want to be there, kind of interact with them. Uh, as a TO, I'm not there to make the game harder for you. I'm there to make sure you're having a good time and then to be impartial when you have a rules question. Like that is my approach as a tournament organizer is first checkbox is are you having fun? And then how can I help you have fun? So a lot of times if I know they're like not having a good time, I'm just trying to be their cheerleader periodically. Um and just like when something good does happen, like I'm just like clapping for them and stuff and trying to like jazz them up a little bit. And that's always been kind of my approach as a TO. And then, like I said, then my second function is to be that impartial rules person. As a player, I can tell you that I've rolled up with some jank lists thinking I'm going to do really well or I'm not going to do well. And I've had both of those interactions happen. I went to Cag Bash, which is a pretty big GT in Cincinnati. And I'm telling you, like, my list was stupid. Like, I was the only person running a Death Kill, a War Trike. I was the only orc player that wasn't running Goffs. Like, it was absolutely dumb. And I remember, like, my first game, I got across the table from the guy and he was like, "Oh, you're playing orcs, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, you playing Goffs?" And I'm like, "Nah." And he's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I explained it to him, and he was like, "Oh man, but Goffs are so killy." But I tagged him with the War Trike, I tagged him with the Knob on Smashes Squig, and then his 10 man of Wardens or whatever the troops are for Custodes, they're all the same to me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they just evaporated to 2 models, and he was just like, "Oh no," and I was like, "Yeah, they're still killy, buddy." Like,
Yeah. This is still happening, man.
but then I've also like rolled up with a like very similar list of other events. Like my first time playing on WTC terrain, very similar list, and I just got like hammered because bikes don't interact with the WTC terrain very well. And I just didn't put any kind of research into it. I was just like, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Because I'm more of a like a table feel player.
Yeah.
I can do quick math to figure out my probabilities and stuff, but if it doesn't feel right on the table, I don't care how good it is. So it's just one of those where now that I know how WTC terrain works, I just know I don't bring bikes like that. So, but yeah, as a TO, I just try to pump them up. And as a player, if I'm in that situation as a player, man, I just, again, my first priority is the person across from me having fun. You know, it, it there's when you're at a tournament, there's no reason to get mad, right? That's always been my approach. Like, you want to get mad at the game, save that when you're in the basement with your buddies. Like, that's like your safe space to me, to get pissed off at the game and, be like that. But when you're out in public, like, you are representing the hobby, and you don't know if the person across from you is playing their first event. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be the reason they never want to go to a tournament again. So, like, even as a player, like, it's all on my attitude. And I just think about, yeah, I'm not doing well today, but how can I make sure I'm at least making the other person have fun? And that's my approach on both sides of that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe, yeah.
No, go ahead, Cliff.
Saying that maybe that's what made me so upset about that post, is that like it's sort of missing. It was almost like a perverse take on the notion that like we all are collectively stewards of the game that we play. You got to be a big boy.
That's right. Put your big boy
Yep,
pants on.
yeah, you can't be screaming in your basement like, "Who the fuck rolls 5 ones in a row? What am I doing?"
I do.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. For all you know, that could have been a person who's been like trying really hard to, like, maybe not their first event, but they maybe have been one of those people who just don't do well, and they've taken out some money to try to do coaching, or maybe they try a new army and they've been trying to improve. They're like, I want to improve at the game. And you're catching them like right as like they're turning that chapter where they're starting to see like limited success. And then you immediately suck that joy out of that turning point for them.
Don't do that.
Like, so that's something too.
Yeah, there's like a collective stewardship responsibility that we all have when you show up at the table, because it's like a forced shared social experience. So I'm realizing now, I think that's what ticked me off so much about that box post, because it's like, we're not going to be there. If someone's having a bad time across the table, for me, I'm not going to like look at them and be like, come on, buddy, pull them up. You'll be all right. I'm like, don't do that. We don't want to do that. You wouldn't do that to somebody in real life. You wouldn't do it across the table from somebody. You'd like do what you can to make sure that they're having a good time, like you just said, Chris. So
yeah, super disrespectful. I'm going to segue real quick because Sam Lemon, a longtime friend of the show, had a good. I thought this was a related question, so I wanted to kind of catch the inertia. Do you like the idea of beginner tournaments, which are set up for those who it's their first or second tourney, and then more advanced events for those who are experienced? I love that. I would say that like RTT, anything that's like a 2,000 point and is using like kind of like whatever the generally accepted terrain format, whether it's player placed, GW or WTC, and it's 2,000 points, by default, I think that's going to like attract any local sharks, and it's going to be an advanced event. I think as soon as you cut to like non-standard stuff, like if you do, I love what they're doing with the new combat patrol, where it's like, hey, show up with your box, play build what's in the box, paint what's in the box, play what's in the box. They say they're balanced for each other. I'm not gonna make any promises on that, but
I think if it's for brand new players showing up, probably it's fine.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's probably fine. And then I think I like that. I love that idea. I've talked with our local TO/store owner about it. I think it's good I think it's a really cool thing that they're doing for like local store owners, where you just like point people towards a box. And it's a great jumping off point for slow grow leagues. And I think slow grow leagues and beginner tournaments are a great thing. I think leagues are probably a little bit better for beginners than like an actual like 1-day tournament. But I think what you can kind of do, and I've seen people do it with like limited success, is they have a slow grow league that coincidentally ends right at or right before a regular 2,000 point RTT. And so at that point, it's kind of like, hey, you've just grown and gotten instantly. Sorry, I hit my mic. You've grown and gotten instantly familiar with this new army of yours that you love and you're having fun with and everything. If you want to take the next step, 1 week after your league, we're having our monthly store tournament. Feel free to show up. We have a fun time. If you don't like the idea of doing a tournament, like some people, it's not that they hate tournaments. It's just not for them. They just don't want to do it. That's not what they want to do. And that's totally valid. They're just like, no, thank you. I'll just play pickup games or I'll play casual games or I'll go look into doing like Crusade or stuff like that. And that's fine too. But I love the idea for sure. I think it's just a little bit better as a league, maybe.
And so I have 2 formats that I run every year, and those are my 2 tournaments that get the best turnout, and they're non-standard formats. Every like February, March, I do a Highlander tournament, and that's rule of one for every data sheet except for troops and dedicated transports. And then a doubles tournament every December. And those non-standard formats for tournaments will really also do well for beginner players because you can't see like all the meta lists, right? And in Highlander especially, it's one of those where you're not going to see the spam lists and the whatever's meta because you can only bring one of everything. And so the having the off format tournaments, even if they're not intended to be beginner friendly, definitely tend to be more beginner friendly. And I would definitely recommend that for anybody that's going to be running events that want something a little bit more friendly to new players.
I love Highlander events. It's not something I seek out, but I've done Highlander RTTs once or twice, and it's a nice kind of like thought exercise when you're building a list, especially if like you're one of those factions that you have 2 or 3 really strong data sheets, and then when you realize the meta list has actually just been only those 2 or 3 strong data sheets. So you start by building the meta list, and then you realize you still have like 900 points to go to build a legal list, and you're kind of like, okay, well, I don't love these units, but what if I have to bring this unit to get otherwise? Because otherwise, I'm just what's it going to do? What's like how can I build around it and stuff like that, and that's always been interesting. And you also have like that nice emotional security blanket where like if you don't win, you're just kind of like, oh, it wasn't a real. It was Highlander. It didn't count. It didn't count any. It's not that I'm not good at the game. It's the format, like so. You get that little like layer to like wrap yourself in and feel safe. So there's that too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, to Tim's point about the slow grow leagues, we literally my local game store just closed out a 3-month long slow grow from like 500 to 1,000 and capped it off with this like 1,000-point RTT at the end of that month. Really just for those players to get like this is how an event runs, this is what it looks like. We're using the real, like you can't bring your Crusade stuff over. We're just using like, standard approach. In anticipation of a 2,000 point list, 2,000 point RTT the following month, and that went great. Yeah, it was a great opportunity just to get people like sort of like simultaneously used to each other, and also like upskilled over time. Cool. Highly recommend.
I definitely think that's probably the biggest hurdle that like people don't really talk about or whatever is the forced social interaction for an extended period of time. And trying to quickly create common ground between two people whose mental models of the game might be and the rule set might be like slightly different, and then quickly reconciling that in like an amicable way. That's something that probably doesn't get talked about enough, and that's a skill set that is easy to take for granted.
Yeah.
And I think the slow grow leagues and that kind of stuff, I think it's as much about developing that skill set as it is about learning the game itself. So the second half of Dan F's question, jumping back, I like how we always jump back and forth between like men's support group and like 40K. So jumping back to the 40K side of things from Dan F, what is the biggest X&1 energy faction release so far that isn't of the night variety? And I got to apologize to Dan publicly for this. I got to eat a little bit of crow. I was up for entirely too long the other night playing Diablo 4, and I thought the boxy Death Guard thing and the X1 energy faction thing, I thought like that was like the same question or whatever. So I thought Dan was saying Death Guard was like an X1 energy faction, and I was like, X and 5 maybe. But so I apologize, Dan. I already apologized to him in Discord, but I'm going to immortalize it in this video. I apologize on that one. I read it. I was too tired to read it too fast.
It's I don't know. I'm biased, obviously, but I think it's Custodes because I think you put Custodes infantry on the table, and we joke about the like less lethal thing, but I think legitimately like having a 2-up armor save and relatively high toughness, let alone access to a 4-up against mortals, I think it's like a real. Those models are difficult to shift unless you're throwing big dice wraith cannons at it, right? And I think that you'll put your guys out there and be like, oh man, they're gonna get shot. Oh look, there's like way more alive than I thought there would be. oh, something's charging me. Oh, wait, like I get to fight first. Oh, weird. That unit is just dead now. I get to move on with my life. I think it's the sort of thing where, like, literally through emergent gameplay, someone who is not necessarily super experienced in the game will find success, and like within that success give themselves the space to like focus on other parts of the game, like where should I be, where can I be in 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. Let me focus on these secondaries, what can I do. But then all you're gonna go in there, if you're not great, you're gonna lose to somebody who's actually really great, or lose to somebody playing Eldar for the first time ever who's just throwing sixes down on the table. Either way, you're gonna lose the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they seem like super forgiving right now, but also have a very high ceiling, I think, given their melee, the like combat phase manipulation they have access to.
What about you, Chris? What do you think?
What exactly are you asking me? Like
That's I forget.
Yeah.
We have got to indoctrinate you. So the premise of the show generically, and you can tell we totally did this. Like we totally got Chris on with that. We're like, hey, we'd like you, come on the show. We didn't tell him anything. We're just like, show up.
Nothing. Like he's not lying.
Nothing.
It was nothing.
We did not.
Here's the time, and I'm definitely going to be late anyway. But here's the time.
Yeah. I did give you a warning. I was like, this is the time we say we're going to show up. This is the time we're actually going to show up. The idea of XM1 was that like Cliff and I got together, and then we kind of got encouraged. There's been a long time for the bad. I'm going to go on a small tangent here. When a lot of content creators started moving into like kind of broad strokes content creation with the purpose of making people better at the game, a lot of the advice given was either felt very complicated or felt convoluted. And even though it was technically correct, it was just like almost a fire hose of information coming at players. And then also a lot of it kind of felt like kind of like step 1, step 2, step 3, draw the rest of the fucking owl, like for success. And or it was kind of like, oh, by the way, terms and conditions may apply. Those terms and conditions are you need to get 8 games a week for this to work for you. And it was kind of like, okay. So Cliff and I and then others were kind of like, hey, and then Anthony was a big champion of this. He was kind of like, hey, a lot of these people with super complicated like plans, like they just their plans kind of fall apart when you run up and you just punch them in the face, and that is true. Like a lot of these like high level players, I felt like whenever I've played gone against like a well-known named player and I lost, a lot of times it was because I shot a unit, for whatever reason, and then I killed like 8 out of 10 guys. And those 2 little guys, I'm like, well, I don't have to worry about them anymore. And then they show up turn like 4 or 5, and it turns out I did have to worry about them. And then they soak Overwatch, they move block, they score, they tie up my stuff. And I'm just like, oh my god, if I just kill those 2 guys, because they just have all those options and everything like that. So XM1 is a lot about really how to lean more into like the simple side of 40K, where like instead of like just doing endless repetitions and trying to big brain our way to success and stuff like that, how do we hit like the broad strokes kind of stuff that gets you like 80% of the way there? And then because a lot of us, the creators of the show, and then a lot of the Patreons of the show are busy with like wife, kids, social life, careers, other games, stuff like that, how to do more of one thing, aka win games, you have to do less of something else. And for us, that's maybe curtailing some of your choices or expectations and leaning more into like unga bunga, powerful type armies and just being like just a thug on the table.
Just go. Want to execute.
And we're really looking for, and I think Cliff gave a perfect example of Custodes, who are a forgiving army, but there is a lot of gas in that tank on how far they can go into an event. They're like a perfect example. A lot of people talk about Knights too. Knights aren't always like an X1 style army, but they do have a lot of raw power. And a lot of times that can just carry you. Hey, I only play 2 games a month, but this army is really good. I know how to build a list. I generically know how to play 40K well. I'm going to make good decisions. Boom. Next thing you know, you're 4-1. That sort of thing. So little speech over.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And like, I'm not going to repeat Cliff, but I would obviously agree with him. I can't argue with that. Like, I have looked through Custodes a bit, and they definitely look like a very forgiving army that will give players some leniency as they kind of figure out their game plan. And honestly, I think Marines as a whole, they don't look bad because they have so many options,
Yeah.
right? It's hard to gauge how good they're going to be in terms of scoring, shooting, killing, because they have more data sheets than anything else in the game. And when you have that many data sheets, unless the whole army is just bad, you have so many ways to do your thing,
Yeah.
right? And that's really it. Like, you look at like all the dreadnoughts look good. You put them on the table, they're going to be forgiving. So you're going to have these anchors so that you can use your Marines to go do various things to score points. And that's, to me, where Marines are going to shine, is when they have their big anchor units to kind of draw that fire to allow their troops to interact and do the things that their troops need to do. I don't think they're going to be as forgiving as like a Custodes army, because they are still just like 2 wounds and they're not T7. Uh, Gaskell T6. I'm not salty about it, but I'm going to mention it.
Not salty, but I'm salty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But no,
It's one of
I do
those,
think, especially as we start to see like all the different sub factions of Marines, like Dark Angels have some interesting play.
Mhm.
Again, like the Knights having damage reduction is going to be pretty solid for a good, like, surprisingly durable unit.
Yep.
Rip Death Guard, but it's
Man.
one of those where, as a whole, I think Marines are going to kind of fit in that, because you're just going to have a tool for whatever you need it for. And I think almost every data sheet I've looked at in that stupid index has got rerolls of some sort.
Your rerolls, baby.
And like the free stratagems, right? Like the captain's allowing you to double up on stratagems and do it for
Yeah.
free. So you're just going to have so many different options and interactions that really the only reason it wouldn't be easy for a newer player is because there's just you get spoiled by choice, and you're going to get decision paralysis. Like, oh my gosh, I can do so many things. What do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think I can add anything onto your guys' answers. You guys actually, those were the two routes I was going to go, Custodes and Space Marine. Well, I mean, also like from a logistical kind of standpoint, those are easy armies for a newer player to pick up.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to
hobby.
for the most. Yeah, they're easy to paint. For the most part, you're not going to have to worry about some obscure unit going like out of stock for 6 months at a time. I'm dealing with that a little bit right now for demons. I'm trying to find like some random chariots, and I'm just like,
Oh.
well, it was back like when I was trying to get fiends all over again. Like it was just hard. I managed to get out ahead of everyone for war dogs, but then like war dogs were just
Those have been
impossible
gone
to
forever.
source
Yeah.
for a long time. Yeah, I think you two guys nailed it. I'm a little bit biased, but I think demons potentially. I think they have a lot of. I think they have a lot of archetypes, but like you could just play oops all big boys, and that probably seems fine.
Yeah.
Slanesh is the tanky faction now for some reason. They have like Filma Pains like on all the big ones. The Bloodthirster just looks good. I mean, he's very one-dimensional, but he looks good. He chops. He does mortals. He does it again. Scarbrand looks great. Be'lakor looks great. You're just like, okay, here's Be'lakor, my big boys, and oh, you went first? Cool. Unless you do within 18 inches of me, you can't shoot me. That's a pretty good way to start a game,
Yeah.
in my perspective. Like if you don't just get immediately Thanos snapped when you don't go second. I don't know exactly what the exact steps to going 4-1 are, but I feel like that would be one of them. So you'll just die when you go second. But yeah, I think you two guys really nailed it. Marines and Custodes. That's a great way, especially so if you're reading this, you're thinking about getting or watch this thing like getting to 40K and you want to go competitive, like yeah, pick up 2 bundle boxes of Custodes or something like that. Just go ham. Next question. I had to delete a few of them because we actually kind of organically answered them. This will be a really good one for hot takes. And Chris, if you need to recuse yourself from this one, I will totally understand. From Tom H. Are pre-launch fixes, aka Votan, the Deathwatch strat, good when there's an obvious problem? Does it ever become a little bit of a bait and switch to drive sales? Chris, Cliff, you go first. Chris, you just blink twice if you can't answer that.
I can answer half of it. So
okay, and then I'll give my answer, and I'll try to keep it very short.
Yeah. Games Workshop is a for-profit company. Its motivation is to sell you plastic miniatures and other merchandise. That is what it is trying to do. Its aims to get there are whatever they're going to be. I honestly do not think that Games Workshop is operating in such bad faith that they'd purposely be like, this is amazing. And then you buy a bunch of like Stern Guard veterans. And then they're like, just kidding, but we did clear out our back stock. Like, that's not, I don't think that's in the strategic plan. What I do think is that they're just making honest mistakes because they're just missing things during the like sort of balance and design process. And that they do like want to fix those things before they hit the tables and like cause a scale of feels bad that they're not really interested in introducing. So like I think it's like net quite good to have fixes like that. And I actually don't think it's an intentional bait and switch situation. I think I'm more frustrated by like the like Horus Heresy plastic kits being like that. To me seems like that feels worse from an I spent money on this and expected to be able to use them perspective than a like, you know, my incredibly overpowered thing that I bought because I was chasing the meta in real time is now not as good, and I like wasted my money. Like if you're trying to live on the bleeding edge, like that edge is not long lasting. So yeah, I don't, you know, it's tough, but I don't think they're trying to scam you on that.
Chris, what do you think? The part you can't talk about.
So I'm not gonna talk on how I feel about the bait and switch kind of interaction. But I will say I do think that the rules adjustments that happen at the speed that they happen, in my opinion, is good for the game. It does have some downsides. As we said before, like it feels almost like a video game company at this point. Like we're now seeing if Bethesda made Warhammer, right? We're going to release this game. It's going to have all kinds of bugs, and we're just going to patch it in real time, and everybody's going to love it eventually. And it's one of those where it's a mixed bag, but I appreciate it. I appreciated the data slates in ninth because, like, once the aircraft nerf hit, orcs were not good, right? And everybody was like, "Oh, it wasn't the aircraft." Yeah, it was. Like, it wasn't even the squig buggies. It was the aircraft. Like, you take those aircraft out of that list, and it falls apart. So it's one of those where getting the data slate to kind of balance and the points constantly, and then if something looks busted like the Votan did, like got to meet the guy that caused that whole interaction. Super cool dude. Told me exactly what happened, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." You know, he was just like, "No, man, I read this one time and was just like not interested." And so, you know, it's one of those where I think it's great for the game when we can have things that are balanced reasonably when they hit the table, rather than let them hit the table, like you said, and create those feel bads for a couple months and then we fix it. You know, and I get that like players who are getting into that army are going to ride that hype train. But if we already set that expectation that this is a potential, I think then it becomes okay. As a player, I just need to set that expectation on myself and understand that if it looks too good to be true, there's a good chance it's going to get changed before I even get to put it on the table. You know, GW never like with the data slates and stuff, they never were disingenuous or dishonest about it. It was very much a okay, this is what it is moving forward. So again, I think the pregame stuff, like before it hits tables, I think it's great for the community and for the game. I am super sorry that it creates feel bads for people who invest in that product before it hits the table. But if you are a video game player and you remember No Man's Sky, right? Yeah, absolute trash game at launch.
Yeah, so bad.
Fantastic game
So
now, but
yeah.
how many refunds did they have to process? And GW is just trying to not get to that point, you know.
I will be the voice of contention here as someone who was recently crossing swords with the community as early as this morning. I when things are bad and you try to whistleblow, it tends to bring out the worst in the community, and a lot of times it feels like the just like when you see like a review on any sort of product, it's always very few people take the time out of their day to go back and review a product they like. But a lot of people are petty enough where if they hate a product, they will like try to like ruin everyone else's day as well, and they'll just leave those scathing reviews. So when you try to whistleblow and you say, "Oh, something is too strong," or whatever, and there's not a whole lot of avenues that are clear or that we can prove are effective to get GW to listen to stuff, especially if we're trying to nerf it before it becomes a problem, or adjust it, or say, "Hey, at least take a second look at this," like that. The biggest way is like, what your TOs taking action or the community taking action. However, like I said, it tends, from what I've seen, to bring out the worst in the community. Whether I agree with what the Bug Eater GT did, whether I agree with it or I don't agree with it or whatever, is besides the point. One, the assumption that people made was that the TO had zero information. Playtesters, TOs, and content creators are all people who are invested into the game at a higher level than your average Joe. So it makes sense that a lot of these people run in the same circles, and a lot of times they all kind of pass information along each other. So to say that a TO to just come out and say as a fact that TO has no information with you not knowing them and that they're just overreacting is a disingenuous concept at its core, whether it's right or wrong. Two, let's just assume that TO was just even remotely for a second trying to be charitable, and was just trying to make sure his players were we're going to have a good time, because like maybe that TO is a playtester, maybe he's friends with the playtester, maybe he's friends with a content creator, and he's seen the games. And he's like, man, if I let this happen, people are not going to have a good time, and a lot of people are going to drop day 2 or whatever, blah blah blah, whatever. So let's just assume it was charitable. It might have not been. I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know anything about him. But it's like anyone who went into that dumpster fire of a thread on Reddit or Facebook and even tried to play devil's advocate for a second and just attribute any sort of charity to that TO pretty much got burned to the stake in the same way that TO did. Likewise, anyone who tries to whistleblow and say, "Hey, X faction might be a little bit too strong. We should probably try to look at it," also gets essentially crucified online. And at a certain point, you're going to have people that basically say, "Okay, well, why am I going to waste my time trying to whistleblow when instead I can just use my access to quickly dump units while people are still excited about buying them, and or buy units and models before the prices go up on eBay and before they go out of stock on GW Store for 6 months at a time. Or I can just try to do the right thing, do right by the community, and just get dragged and flamed, and just have my day completely ruined." And so it seems to me that there's been a huge influx in the hobby, and a lot of those people that have joined the hobby after fall of 2019 when Iron Hands were introduced to the game. And I think we need to go back to that again, where we see what happens when the game just gets completely ruined by one faction for the better part of 6 months, and it's all you see at every single event. If nothing else, so that way people can understand, and we can understand that like we aren't just out to get these factions. A lot of us that are advocating, for these factions get looked at, play these factions, but we understand it's not healthy for the game. But it's also not healthy for people's mental health to try and do right by the community, and then the worst aspects of the community just viciously attack you. So I'm going to basically be the counter voice here and say that I think we do need to have a little bit of let the masses suffer and have an Iron Hands 3.0 and really show what it's like when something hits the table broken and stays broken for 3 to 6 months, and then we can kind of go back to doing like right by the community. So that's my take on it.
I'm remembering writing that like Leagues of Votan like math rundown article. It's just like these units are so efficient. the pre-release rules. These units are so efficient.
Yeah.
This army-wide rule skips the math in a way that like nothing else in the game to that point had been released. It had been released did, and just giving a pretty neutral like this is crazy, and needs to be addressed if we want to avoid an iron hands end base situation. And even coming into that with like reasonable argument. Here's all the evidence. Here's the proof. Here's multiple units of comparison. Here's all the math. There was still like, dude, no, like I love these guys. Like I'm a lifelong Votan player. What do you mean? Like let's let it hit the tables first. It's like I'm with you, man. The models look cool. Sagittar army, go. But also like we're all playing a game. Like it needs to be fun, and part of the fun is feeling like you have a shot at the table, no matter who you're playing. And like running up against, running into some of these factions without the changes leads to you showing up to the table and just getting blasted in 1 or 2 turns and not having a great time. So, yeah, sorry guys.
Yeah. I distinctly remember that you basically like putting so much work and effort into this, and then you still had the cognitive dissonance like thrown back at you, and I was just like,
right.
Man.
I work in politics though, so I'm like sort of a sucker for that kind of public scrutiny and punishment. So it's your
kink.
I'm into it. Yeah, exactly.
All right, from Terry N. With Battlescribe being gone for 10th edition, what would all recommend for creating a submitting list for BCP? I was thinking of taking a smartphone picture of a Polaroid picture of a list on a legal pad, but I don't want to piss off the TO. Well, I'm glad that's what stopped you from doing that.
Yeah, pen and paper, throw it in an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh crap! I closed the pin messages. I'm skipping that question because otherwise I will go on a rant, and this episode will stretch to 4 hours.
Oh boy, yeah.
And Chris will be like, please let me escape from this show. From Jake B. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but it said, what are the first few baby steps to hitting more 2-day events through a year? I did a whole 1 event last year that was more than 3 rounds. I'm very interested in hitting up multiple GTs, especially with the hype of the new edition, but the logistics kind of suck. Leaving my wife alone with our kid over a full weekend and a hotel cost for 1 to 2 nights doesn't feel like it should be as big of a hurdle as it's turning out to be. Enlighten me, X1 rock stars. Well, I'm going to start by reframing this. Leaving your wife alone with your kid over a full weekend plus hotel costs for 1 to 2 nights, that is a big hurdle, man. Like that is, that's a big ass. Like, don't feel bad about that. Like, I have to take, like, that's for me, like that's in the middle of my work week. So like I have to get like time off approved in a career field that is notoriously short staffed, so I like usually involves like shift swaps, like begging and pleading with my supervisor, coming down with a really coincidentally timed cold, all sorts of other stuff. And then I have to like take care of like childcare. Then I have to like make it up to my wife somehow, or just bring the wife and kid along and then find stuff for them to do. I have to possibly like get like my parents involved. Thankfully, my parents they moved down here to Florida because they're empty nesters now. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, so they're 5 minutes away. But my dad, my mom,
Oldest
cool. But my dad's not in the best health anymore, and my mom still works, and she has a weird schedule too. So like there's a lot of like moving pieces that have to come along. And so now for me, it's kind of like, hey, I just don't go to as many events as I used to. That's part of like why I did this show now. It's like it was my outlet because I just don't go to as many events as I used to. But I still want to talk. I still want to share info, share knowledge, and kind of like live vicariously through all the people that can go to events. And this is kind of my outlet for doing that. And unfortunately, like until your kid gets older, probably like you might just have to live vicariously through other people, hop on TTS, cultivate a local group, stuff like that. Try to be more selective with the events you go to. Try to go to events that are like in destination cities and make like a trip out of it. Is it going to drastically increase the cost of your trip? Yes, it is. I'm going to WTC this summer. I'm bringing along my wife. I'm bringing along my kid. I'm bringing along a 19-year-old babysitter. I have 2 hotel rooms instead of 1. I had to buy 4 freaking plane tickets. That is not tenable for doing multiple events a year, let me tell you what. But I can do it like clear conscious, knowing that like there isn't going to be like that like resentment within my family unit, or like that kind of like friction or stuff like that. And that's a real thing you have to factor in. If you want someone who's going to support you, that is like these are the conversations you have to have.
So one thing I will add on that is it's also very dependent on your geographic location, right? I'm fortunate enough to live an hour outside of Chicago and about 2 hours outside of Indy. So, like, if there's a 2 day event in Chicago, I could comfortably make that commute every day. So that's also a thing to keep in mind is if you live in an area where maybe there's one close by, you don't have to get that. And as far as the expense hurdle goes, man, get you some friends so you can actually go together and then split the cost of the hotel or the Airbnb. Now, the
Yeah.
childcare and the wife, man, that's going to be however you guys decide to handle that. All I can do is tell you what I do and tell you if it works. But it's really again just going to that understanding and just setting that expectation, having the conversation. Hey, I would like to do 2 events this year that are all weekend long, and I'll space them out so they're not just back to back to back, you know. But ultimately, just keep in mind your geographic location. If you're lucky like me and you live in a cornfield that's an hour outside of one city and 2 hours outside of another, try to find them closer. Will help you out tremendously.
Cliff, what about you? How'd you sell LVO?
So it was the one like big travel event that I'd gone to. I just like hit up the local store for RTTs up really, and it's like a 20-minute drive. So like it's not my in-person time most of the time is pretty low key. It was Vegas. It was on a weekend where like my mother-in-law was available, my sister-in-law was available. Got 2 young kids. My wife didn't have. My wife's a surgeon. She wasn't on call. So like all of these things came together to be like, oh yeah, you can go. I'm like, all right, great. Like I'm off. But all of those stars had to align in order to make sure that was possible. And it was literally like just me going to Vegas, and specifically going to Vegas and not doing Vegas things. Like it was like us hanging out, playing 40K, meeting the rest of the guys, drinking at the Applebee's, right? Like getting after it in that way. So, yeah, just like planning out ahead of time and making sure you're accurately splitting your responsibilities with your significant other helps a lot.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, Leslie, I don't want to like completely like take over the conversation, but just be, and this might come with experience, but be a little more scrutinizing is the word I'm looking for. I don't know. Don't just go chase like the biggest event out there. Be like, oh, this is the biggest event. So this is going to be the one I want to go to. Take into account like a lot of things, like which one is going to have like the most friends you're going to go with, or which one has like a nice hotel, or which one has a history of being a good event with good terrain, with lots of judges or lots of support. That lots of people like always talk about, and you have a lot of like faithful people who go every year because the TO like really puts on a good event and stuff like that. Because if you just go to the biggest event and you're ignoring all the warts of the event, and then you kind of don't do as well as you expected to do, and like you're right off the bat, like you kind of start tilting a little bit because you're not performing as well as you thought. If all those other things are not going well, you might be tempted to be like, man, I miss my wife, I miss my kids, and you're sitting in your hotel room at like Friday night or Saturday night, and you're looking at early flights home and stuff like that, and that's not really the situation you want to be in. But if your friends are going, and if it's a well-run event, and you have all this other stuff going on too, if you aren't doing as well, you're more likely just to like kind of shift your expectations and still end up having a great time. And then like maybe even rally like day 2 or whatever, and you finish up like 3-2 or something like that, So that's the other thing I'd say is just pay more attention to event quality. Cool. So next question. Oh, we already talked about this. We talked about the invalidating collections thing. We had a long talk about that.
Mm.
Oh, here's a good one. We'll let Chris, our guest, answer this one first because we've answered this a couple times, but I'm always happy to answer it again. From Joel T, any tips for getting the most out of re-rack sessions when practicing? Chris, do you ever do re-racks when you practice games?
Yeah, absolutely. When Tau first launched in ninth, there was a lot of re-racking because it was a lot of I'm off the table in 2 turns, right? Uh, and really the big thing is like if you're re-racking, you gotta take into account a few things. Like, are you tweaking anything in re-racking, or are you just playing the same thing? And if you're just playing the same thing and you know you're gonna re-rack, take you some notes, whether you are writing them down, whether you are mentally doing it, but you need to think about what went well, what didn't go well, and what it is you need to change. Because sometimes, like if you have a list concept, it's probably not going to work the first time you put it on the table. Like that's just how it goes, right? Unless it's like something super good. It's probably not working the first time you put it on the table, especially if you're playing against somebody who plays against you a lot, because they already know your kind of play style, what you tend to do. So if you're re-racking, man, just do it as soon as you realize, like have the conversation, do it as soon as you realize you aren't, as soon as you realize things aren't going the way you think they should, right? Like if you get to turn 3 and you're just getting your teeth kicked in, just look at him and be like, hey man, I'd like to stop, I'd like to re-rack, I'd like to go again. And then again, just be mindful of what it is you did and how to do it differently. So like when we play on Fridays, we play enough at this point that we don't necessarily have to, but we were taking notepads for a while and just being like, okay, I think this should work. And when it doesn't, okay, why didn't it work? Right? Um, was it just a case of like super bad dice? Because that does occasionally happen with dice games. Or was it just like you did the math and it sounded good, but once you hit the table with it, it just doesn't work out?
Yeah.
Because again, you can't account for every variable with math that's going to happen on the table, because like, are they in terrain, are they not in terrain, is this, like the positioning is going to be different. So I would try to head it off as early as possible in the game that you realize it's just not going to work, and just be as cordial as possible. Hey man, here's what I was trying to do. And also, obviously if we're re-racking, it's because we're trying to change something, improve something. Ask that opponent, what do you think I could do differently? So I'm an orc player. I play against a Tau player a lot, and we have a very different perspective on the game. But because of the way we play, our Tau player is not afraid to charge people with stuff,
Mhm.
right? Like he just knows it's part of the game and he's got to do it. And he'd rather fight on his terms than my terms. So again, like get the perspective of the different people that you play against, because they're gonna understand the game differently than you do, and they'll give you insights that you might not necessarily know. And the sooner you can head it off and re-rack and get those insights, the sooner you can get dice back on the table and hopefully have a little bit more fun with the next iteration of your game.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, re-racks are important. I know, like almost every time the conversation of re-racks comes up, there's always one person who's kind of like, "Oh, well, the end game is important," or "Oh, I like to play full games." It's like, well, one, no one asked you. Two, not all games go to round 5, but every single game goes through round 1. So that is why re-racks are so important, because every single game has a deployment step, and every single game has those first like 1 to 2 rounds. It's very rare that someone gets tabled at the top of 1. And even if you do, you can immediately kind of feedback loop that to like list construction and deployment, assuming terrain is decent. But yeah, you're really trying to hone in on your deployment, and then like you're kind of like your opening moves. Like when you're playing chess, a lot of people practice their openers for the same reason, because not every chess game goes into the end game, but every chess game has that early game. And so a lot of people, especially when they're just starting out, they practice their openers until they know them all cold, until they recognize them. And you can kind of transfer that a little bit to 40K. Practice your deployment, practice your openers, scoring your initial units, like you're trying to clear screens, you're trying to start that escalation war of trading units, stuff like that. For like trying to tease out or force your opponent to commit his units earlier than he wants to commit them, because otherwise you're going to score like a bunch of points with some cheap unit or something like that. And he has to make that kind of devil's choice. Like what you said, when you're trying out lists or stuff like that happens a lot. It's happened to me too, where I'm just like, I think we've all been there where you're kind of like, hey man, I want to try out this new list concept, or I want to try out this new unit. And you're playing an army that you're not quite familiar with. So you kind of like don't have that muscle memory built in, you deploy it a little bit weird. And then you go into your opponent who has like 50 games under his belt with his own GT list, and he just kills that unit right off the rip. And then like he's like, yeah, that unit didn't impress me very much. And you're like, thanks, buddy. Like, thanks. We've all been there. But that's a great session to re-rack. Like anytime you feel like anytime you feel like you've learned as much as you can from that rep, or anytime you feel like the game is getting to a state where it's like not representative, it's kind of like, hey, my first combat of the game, I charge and I hit a vehicle and then it blows up and the explosion kills like 5 out of my 6 characters. It's kind of like, all right, well, that could happen.
Like, what if that didn't happen?
Yeah, but it's also kind of like this game is if we continue, this game is
not
no
real.
Longer like it's no longer it's not real. It's no longer representative. So that would be a great time to like kind of like laugh and then be like, all right, let's just pretend that didn't happen, or let's just like reset, because like this game is no longer representative. And if we're just having a game, we're just having a game. Play it as it lies,
Mm-hmm.
But or if you want to practice playing from behind, you do you. But that's a great way to do it. Also, I think if you are trying a new concept and you have the rough idea of a list, but you kind of have a couple units you're not sure about, and you're kind of like, okay, well, this is the iteration A, but I have iteration B and C ready to go. Bring those models with you to your practice session. Get some reps in until you are sure. And if you're kind of like, hey, iteration A, like I was worried about this unit not making the cut, and my confirmation is true, it's not going to make it. Boom. Iteration B, same mission, like redeploy everything, use this time to adjust your deployment. Let's go again. That way you can really kind of like, fast forward your iteration of lists. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would recommend.
I would add 2 things. One, this is broadly for like any sort of practice that you're engaged in. If you're trying to do deliberate practice, you want to go in it with like fairly specifically outlined goals. So like to Tim's point, if your goal is like, we really want to get turns 1 and 2 right, like in the NFL, basically, like every team has an opening kickoff scripted series, like on the first set of downs, like they practice it. It's what they're going to run. They're just going to go and execute. If your goal is to hit turns 1, deployment, turn 1, maybe turn 2 down, like go into it with your opponent who ideally has the same goal and like run through those. If you want to get that practice, like, okay, cool, let's run through that. You get to turn 3 and you're like, all right, let me see how the end game rolls out. Do the same thing, but just from that point in the game, where you're rolling out like from turn 3 on, where does 3, 4, 5 look like when I'm trying to grind something out in a closely contested game. And then again, be comfortable bringing it back. Like, okay, that didn't work, that advance didn't go, but that melee charge didn't go off. Like, just bring it back and see what you can do.
Yeah, I'll add what Pizza Bagels said, because I feel like this is really good. Also, taking photos of the board state is great too, especially now like smartphones. You can draw on a smartphone, or whatever. Like that's a great way for the two of you like take a picture of the board state, and then like you play your game, and then like after you re-rack, you kind of like you can like look at the photo together, and you can kind of collaborate. Be like, all right, man, see like over here you deploy this unit, and then you draw like the angle and be like, well, because you were over here and then you had to move up to shoot this unit, now you're in threat range where I was able to charge, and you never got this objective back, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely
like 25 years ago in White Dwarf, they'd have these Warhammer Fantasy battle reports and these 40K battle reports, and they would have the like green and red arrows showing like where it was next, what the
love those.
was. I was obsessed with those, and like
those are so cool.
I would pay some money for like a series like that by skilled players with narration in real time. Like that would be sick. Just X's and O's. 40K.
I could talk to Innes and Anthony and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's something we can bring back. Okay, from Jake B. My apologies, Chris, if you don't play Diablo 4, but we are kind of leading into it because it was the name of the episode. Jake B wants a tier list of Diablo 4 classes. I could be reasonable and be like, oh, is this for endgame or this is for leveling and blah blah blah. But no, screw that. We're just gonna do like hot takes and with no context. Barb, Source, Druid. No, sorry, Barb, Rogue, Source, Druid, and then Necro. That's my tier list. No context. I'm just naming out numbers. Cliff, go.
Source, Barb. No, Source, Rogue, Barb, Druid. Sort of the same, Druid a little bit lower, and then Necro at the end.
Chris, this is even better if you don't play. Just blur out things.
So I've not played 4 yet. I haven't played Diablo since 3. So
he says Necro number 1. You heard it here first.
Yep, that's it. Number 1. Is the Crusader still a thing? Because if it is, it's going to be my favorite regardless.
It's not, which is crazy.
Trash game. Won't buy it. 0 out of 10.
You heard it first.
That's my hot take for today.
I love it.
Awesome. I'll totally put in a tier list that is like just makes no sense, and it's going to have classes that aren't even in the game, and I'm just going to attribute it to you.
Hell yeah!
So enjoy your internet outrage. No, I really wanted to put Source number 1, but I think Barb actually. I think Source falls off a little bit in the end game. Barb is number 1, but
even after the nerfs.
Yeah, no, it's the Barb is really, really, really strong. Apparently, that's what everyone's been saying. But every single time I play Diablo, I always, whether it's starting a new Diablo game, like Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 or Diablo 2 Resurrected, or just coming back to the game after a lengthy time, I always start with Sorceress. Sorceress has just always been my personal favorite class. So I really wanted to put her number 1, but I couldn't. She's probably not even close to number 1. But who cares? Starting Monday, I had to go to WTC prep anyhow. And like I said, I'm a dummy and I added the captain. So yeah, I kind of played myself there. Whoops. Next question. This one is more focused towards Cliff. But he says he's willing to take advice from anyone. I'm about to push for a significant promotion progression in my current corporate role, finance and accounting background. What advice or things do you normally try to do before submitting a business case for promotion progression? I've analyzed the requirements for the next level and have positive testimonials from clients worked on, but any further general advice is greatly appreciated.
Oh man, and my internet's messing up right on time. I'm going to refresh and then come right back. Try to see if I can cut off the
cut off.
Hey, he cut off already. I like how he cut himself off. Mark Murphy, old school White Dwarf reports ruled. Yes, hard agree. See if I met while Cliff is going. Oh, here he is. Hey, Cliff.
It works. Back, Cliff. Right. That was speedy. And sorry, Jeremy, in the background, because that's going to be frustrating to edit. So, given that you're in finance and accounting, so much of this is dependent on the relationship that you have with the person that you're reporting to and what the general tenor of the firm that you're working at is. Like, is it the sort of place where self-advocacy is effective, or do they just have set guidelines and timelines and go for it? Given that you're in finance and accounting, I think it's worth making the business case for it. Like, what revenue have you brought in? What's your value add? What is your potential value add given additional responsibility and scope of work that you've already indicated that you're willing to take on? And what evidence is there that you can take on that work successfully as soon as you have the additional responsibility and run? If it's a management role and you haven't previously managed people before, you want to at least indicate your ability to manage projects and multiple streams of work effectively, and your ability to work across teams and laterally manage is going to help you out there. If it's going to be your first time managing, if you've already managed people, if you've done really great jobs with your direct reports, then this tier list is unreal. If you've already managed a team, then bring their testimonials in as additional evidence that you're ready to take on larger management responsibility with folks with even more status. That's the very adult rundown that I would give if I was working with someone on my team who's looking for promotion or elsewhere.
Awesome. No, that sounded good. I wish I could give advice, but my work email has been locked for 5 years.
Don't know it. Don't check it. See you later.
Yeah, no, I just show up every day to work in a t-shirt, short, and flip flops, and I just make the dots don't touch. So
Which is
last
critically
month,
important, in fact.
I mean, they pay me to do it. So, Chris, it's a little bit of an insider joke. I don't even know where this came from, but every time we have a guest on, like on any of our shows, we always have to ask them, "What is your favorite way to eat an egg?"
So I'm just gonna answer this the way it's presented. I don't know what the subtext is.
There's no. It's not. It's not a
Okay.
trick question.
So
People just seriously. I think they care more about asking it than they actually do the answer.
Oh, well, so I'm gonna answer it anyway because I eat 4 eggs every day for breakfast, and it's literally any way I can. Like I love eggs, so that is just I don't care, man. I'll eat them any way they're put in front of me.
Egg lover, yes.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
I thought it was funny. Like there was it was like last week's episode on the main show or something like that, or like 2 weeks ago, and like the guest said omelet, and everyone like lost their mind because we were like 60 episodes in, and that was the first person that had ever answered omelet, and people were like, "Holy shit! How could we have been so blind?"
The superior form of egg.
Oh my god! No, the comments section like went ape shit for like 2 minutes. Like the show like entirely derailed. It was. I swear we're not a cult. Enjoy your time in our Discord. It is weird in there.
Yeah, it's all right.
Weird but good.
Yeah, weird but good. Chaotic good. Let me scroll through question locker. Preston's kind of trolling a little bit. He said, what armies do the characters in Bluey play? I feel like they'd all play like orcs. They don't play orcs or Tau because either they'd be super naive or they'd just be super happy and just happy to be there regardless of what's going on.
Bluey for sure plays orcs.
The dad is 100% an orc player.
Agreed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bandits all.
Yeah.
I feel like Bingo would play Tau because like no, because people actually like Bingo. I'm probably gonna get some hate for that one. I was like trying to grab the negativity, but like it's like negativity in like a sweet, not like an annoying way. What other? Oh no! Get that shit out from between my toes and trying to spank my heels. What are they talking about?
Doesn't sound like
there's. Man, I don't know. They're talking about like footwear and like I don't know, Crocs versus flip flops. We'll figure that out later. All right, I think that's all the questions, man. Chris, it was awesome to meet you. I hope you had a good time. We went a little bit over time. We always do. The 2 hours is kind of long, but you're an hour behind us. You're an hour behind us, so maybe it worked out.
That's right. Yeah, no, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great time, and I enjoy meeting the whole community. It was awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm glad you got to meet Jeremy first because he's probably like the most like even keeled of like our team, you know. So that was a good break. And now, as you like, if you actually make like the decision to interact with other human beings in our Discord, like you're gonna be like, oh, what have I done? So yeah, no, you messed up. We're part of your lives now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are now an honorary member of the Discord because you were a guest on the show, so you have access. Feel free to kind of explore around in there. We've done as we've gotten bigger, we've definitely like organized the Discord and try to make it a little bit more organized while still keeping kind of the tongue in cheek and everything. So just have fun, interact with people in there, and hopefully I'll see you in Tampa in a few months.
Hell yeah, man! Hope so.
I'm going to shout out, Chris. I'm going to shout you out because
for it.
My internet's going crazy. Sorry about the video for people who are watching on YouTube all over, but the podcast should be fine. Chris's YouTube channel is fantastic. Like,
thank you.
They're diagrammed rundowns, phase interactions in a really easy to understand way. Chris has a great voice. It's great content, and if you haven't checked it out already, you should go check it out.
It's that soothing Chicago accent, man. It's the nasally pitch. It wins people over every time.
For those of you who are listening to this on Spotify or not on video, it's youtube.com/@PhoenixGamingChris. Or you can hop over to YouTube. I posted it multiple times in the chat and the video description. But I've already went over there and subscribed. I plan on watching some of it tomorrow when I'm not getting mad about like points releases. And yeah, it looks like really good stuff. I can't wait to check it out. Chris, anything else you want to plug before we close this out?
The main thing is just, again, thanks for letting me be on with you guys. And one of the things I will be working on once we resume stream games. So we do stream games once a week, and there's typically like a 2,000 point, fairly competitive game. So it's definitely coming with a competitive mindset. But one of the things I'm gonna start working on is after stream downloading it, and then exactly what you guys were talking about is like having arrow diagrams and talking about why
Yeah.
units are moving, where they're moving. I had started to work on it before 10th kind of got announced and stuff, but I just stopped when I realized, like, okay, there's no point right now.
Yeah.
So as
Yeah.
we get points and I get to start getting stream games back in, the stream games will be live. You'll see them. They'll be on the YouTube channel, but then I'll re-edit and re-upload. So you'll be able to see kind of like my breakdown on what's happening, or at least what my perspective of what's happening is. So like if I were to play Cliff, for example, I'm not going to ask Cliff what he's doing while we're streaming. If he tells everybody, that's even better because it's a stream game. But it's one of those where when I'm watching it, I'm going to at least break down what I see and why I think he's doing it and where he's going with it, or why I'm making the moves I'm making. So it is a thing that I will be working on here pretty soon.
That's very cool. I definitely love that kind of stuff because you get to keep that realistic feel of like not having perfect information, of like not knowing what your opponent is trying. You can kind of guess what your opponent's trying to do strategically, but you don't know. But then going afterwards and like really kind of doing that commentary, I love that type of stream commentary.
And it works for me because I am an instinctual player, right? I am not a math player. Like I'm not a stats guy at all. Like I just look at it and I'm like, okay, this is what's probably going to happen. This is what I think is going to happen. And I've been lucky enough that I've gotten enough table time that it works for me. When I ran my store, I was playing with customers almost every day. Like for a good year or two, I probably played almost 1,000 games of 40K over the course of a year, just because of interacting with customers coming in and out of the store and stuff. So, like, you guys talking about numbers sheds light on the things that I do in games from a perspective that I just don't look at it from. You're like, oh, the math on this is so good. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. Like, it looks good on the table, man. So it's
Big guns shoot good.
yeah. You can't make them all, right? Like that's just my philosophy. If I just throw enough dice at it, it'll fix any problem in the game. But yeah, just wanted to shout that out. We will be working on that. It is just me and one other person working on it, so each one will probably take a while to get up. But the stream games will be once a week at least.
Awesome. Yeah, let us know when you get that up and off the ground and stuff like that. We'll make sure to do a little bit of signal boosting over at Stat Check.
Heck yeah.
Since people your
Happy to shout it out.
Cool. Cliff, man, you got anything else you wanna plug, talk about before we close this out and resume in 2 weeks?
Nah, man. Bleeding Edge, buy Wraith Knights. Be prepped for them to get nerfed anyway, but you'll have beautiful models. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, I mean, we got a whole thing going. We got this show. We got the standard show. Actual Stat Check on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. We got Enter the Matrix with Typhus. WTC's coming up. Revisit those episodes. It's going to be great context to see who's on what teams, what the captains are doing. We're going to be in a whole new edition, so who knows what crazy stuff they're going to come up with. But know that Enter the Matrix coverage is going to be key to understanding those interactions. Yeah, thanks for hanging with us for the last 2.5 hours. Hit us up on Patreon, patreon.com/statcheck. Hit us up on YouTube, youtube.com/statcheck. Hit us up on the internet, stat-check.com. Dashboard will be updated with all the goodies for 10th edition. We'll have all your favorite statistics on the competitive beta from day 1 of 10th starting, which is going to be pretty sick. Got a bunch of new plans in store, a whole bunch of resources coming out of the Discord organically, and that we've got planned. Yes, it's great. Tim, you're the man. Thanks for
Awesome
guiding through these past 2.5 hours.
Guys, again, thank you so much. I know both of you are busy, so again, thank you so much for joining me for 2 hours of your evening. Please go enjoy, be with your families, or relax, do whatever you want to do. And then everyone who's been watching and listening, thank you so much for supporting Stat Check. Hopefully you go and support Chris as well. And we will see you in the next episode of X1 and in 10th edition. Night, everyone.
Peace.